Hello there ladies and gents, and welcome back to another riveting episode of AMC's Garage. Today we're going to be changing these boring standard rubber brake hoses for these fancy shiny stainless steel braided ones. Brake hoses. We've all got them, we all need them. But apparently they really ought to be changed every 4 years due to deterioration and general wear and tear. And seeing as my bike is now 13 years old and these look like they've never been moved, I think it's probably about time. So I'm going to take this opportunity to replace them with a spangly set of stainless steel ones. So for this job, we're going to need stainless steel brake lines, .4 brake fluid, a piece of clear hose, an empty liquid container, some tools, and lots of rags and tissues to mop up any mess. As you can see, the brake setup on my bike, which is a 2006 FZ1N, is a single hose from the master cylinder, which comes down to this splitter here, and then one hose for each side down to each caliper. Now, before we take them off, the first thing we're going to have to do is drain the brake fluid out of the system. And in order to do this, we're going to use the bleed nipples on the tops of the calipers here. I'm going to start on the right hand side because that's where I'm already sat. Efficiency, innit? Take our piece of hose, jam that over the bleed nipple, poke the other end into our empty container, jam the other end into our empty container, and then using an 8mm spanner, loosen off that bleed nipple very slightly. Although actually, before I go any further, I should let you know that brake fluid, the stuff that's in this braking system, is horrendously corrosive to paintwork. So if you splash any of this on your paintwork, it'll destroy it in seconds. So whatever you do, don't. And with that in mind, I'm going to keep a rag handy because I don't want to be getting any brake fluid that might happen to leak out onto the paint of the wheels. We just loosen that off very slightly. And of course, because the system is still sealed, nothing is really going to come out until I squeeze the brake lever a tiny bit. And then, as you can see, some brake fluid coming down the pipe now and into the bottle. I'm just going to keep squeezing the brake lever until this doesn't give us any more results. Yep, I'm getting nothing now. It's just completely slack. So now what we need to do to open up the system, once again with plenty of anti-spillage measures. I've just remembered I've stuck the heated grips control jobby on with dual lock, so I can remove that. Poke it over there out of the way. As I was saying, anti-spillage measures, and using a crosshead screwdriver, discover that the screws are completely seized. Try a slightly different approach with the ratchet bit out of this handy little toolkit that I've got, so I can put a bit more pressure on from the top. There we go. Bit of movement from that one. See if we can budge the other one, although that looks pretty gnarled up already. Brilliant. Yep, there we go. Got some movement. Perhaps that's the reason why the brake lines have never been changed. Unscrew that the rest of the way. Hopefully there should be relatively little risk of spillage out of this now because we've already drained a fair amount out, so the level should be quite low. Now, take the lid of the master cylinder reservoir off, and with all of its rubbery gasket nonsense, just give that a quick wipe once again to try and minimize the danger of dripping on anything. And obviously, once again, it goes without saying that once you've wiped up brake fluid with a rag, probably best to stick it in a bag, label it as brake fluid, or get rid of it, because the last thing you want to do is then grab it on another day when you've forgotten about it and start polishing your bike. Yeah, so we'll put that somewhere safe. And also just thinking about it, because I've got the handlebars turned, the level of the reservoir is now taking in air instead of pushing the fluid down the line. So if I turn the bars back the other way, I'll be able to push a little bit more out. There we go. With every squeeze, it's taking a little bit more out of the reservoir. And the last bit in there, you can just absorb out with a piece of this absorby paper stuff. So now we've got this end about as empty as it looks like we're going to get it. Give the nipple a wipe. I know, that's what she said. And then just nip it back on because I don't want any surprises, any last dribbles squirting out while we're working on the other side. Because now we can come around to the other side, repeat the same procedure. Put the hose on the nipple, loosen it off a tiny bit, and then give the brake lever a squeeze. Yeah, obviously this isn't going to be very quick now because there's so much air in the system. And it looks like that's about it. Obviously it was going to be less on this side because by draining the other side we would have gone from the reservoir down to this point and down to the caliper, so it only would have been the liquid that was in this length of hose. It's just pushing nothing but brake fluid bubbles through there now. Nip that back on, take off our hose, It worries me a little bit. There's really not very much brake fluid in there. But regardless, we shall move on. And just to avoid disaster, I'm going to put the lid back on that, because if I kick it over and it squirts over something painted, that's going to be utterly disastrous. So the next step is obviously going to be to remove the hoses. And because a lot of it is hiding up there behind the headlight, I think it's going to be a lot easier both to remove this one and to run the new hoses through if we just take the headlight off. Now, I've done this so many other times in other videos that I'm just going to use the magical trickery of video to make the headlight disappear. So now we can see a whole lot clearer this brake line coming down here and then going either side of the wheel. Just in case of any drips or further leaks, I'm going to tip the wheel to the right so that anything that comes out is going to fall to the floor rather than into the wheel. But in any case, still having plenty of rags ready just in case I've massively underestimated how much fluid is in the system. Yeah, so there is fluid coming out. The question is how much? Not very much at all. Banjo bolt, because I don't have any in the new kit, I'm going to need to use again. So I put that over there where it's safe. So I'm going to hold the hose away, give it a wipe. Actually, thinking about it, what probably would have been a little bit more clever would have been to remove this bracket first, so I'm not going to be jiggling this around and possibly shaking out more brake fluid. But too late now. The power of hindsight, eh? Jeez, how long is this bolt? I've just figured it out. Like every good set of handlebars, there's a nut behind it. Looks like a 10 to me. Spot on. There goes that. And this bracket is simply just a piece of pressed metal bent around the hose, so you need to force it apart, and then we can put that onto the next hose, hopefully. And then a top tip as we continue with this dismantling is just to put all of this inside of a Ziploc bag like that. And if while we're buggering around up there, any more fluid decides to come down, it's going to get caught in this bag instead of running onto the floor or even worse onto the wheel. And then we can move around to the other side. So again, bend it open, take it off of that hose. Tissue around the banjo bolt. Okay, so that's cracked off. There we go. Not much fluid in there either. Give that a wipe off. And we could probably bring this around and stick it in the same Ziploc bag. There we go. So they're both in there and they're not going anywhere. But just to be sure. Oh dear. Oh, I've got claret coming out of me. There's an emergency workshop plaster. Wipe my blood off of the bike. I'm very sinister. I think this is the first one of my videos with blood in it. And we can continue. So the next step I'm going to take is to remove this little bracket here, this little splitter, because if I can help it, I'm going to try not to break this system apart anymore. I'm just going to take it off as one whole piece. And also, I no longer need this splitter, so it's a bit of weight saved, isn't it? Get an extra 0.05 miles to the gallon. Slide that. Actually, thinking about it, I've looked at it from a different angle. Put that nut back on. If we undo it from the front, that whole bracket should come off. There we go. Much better. So actually, if I unplug my double hornage here, I should be able to just squeeze this whole arrangement through the gap there. In fact, I think it is going to be easier to take this bracket off of the splitter as well. Okay, so that's out. I can now persuade this between the horns out of the way. So now I've just got one cable tie up here holding it to the frame. And now that that's completely free, you can undo this last banjo bolt and remove the lines completely from the system. So once again, plenty of fresh rag just in case there's anything left in the pipe. Crack that off. Do the banjo bolt, but be sure to hold the lines because they're going to jump for freedom as soon as this bolt is out. And there we go. And this banjo bolt we don't actually need because we've got a double banjo bolt for the first connection in the kit. And there we go, there's our standard 3-piece brake line kit removed from the bike. I'm also just going to stuff that other end into that zippy locky bag just in case there's still some fluid in there. I want to keep it all in one place. Before I get rid of this, when I come to use this bracket again, this clip is going to be far too big for the very reduced diameter of the stainless steel lines. So what I want to do is to remove these little rubber spacey bracket things from the old brake lines. There's one. There's the t'other one. So now I can just wrap these around the new hoses, crimp them back in there, and this bracket isn't going to be wearing into the new hoses as the bike vibrates and moves around. So now we can finally open the packet with our shiny new brake lines, which are made by Pro Brake, incidentally. I've only ever seen these in Germany, and I did buy these with my own money, so hopefully they're going to be really good. And in the kit we've got 2 brake lines, a double banjo bolt, which is essentially the same as the banjo bolt that was in there, but because we're putting 2 brake lines together, it's got 2 channels for the fluid to flow through. And that's an aluminium banjo bolt, black anodized by the look of it. We've also got new crush washers, and we need to have a crush washer in between each point where 2 parts are meeting. So that means at this top end, we're going to need one on the bolt. Then we're going to go through the first banjo bolt, then another washer, the second banjo bolt, then another washer, and then we can screw that into the brake reservoir. Though thinking about it, the brake line needs to go that way, so it goes behind the headlight. So just do that again, get it in the right direction this time. We've got the hoses heading off into that direction the same way as they went before. Screw that into the reservoir. Because that feels a bit stiff, like it doesn't like it, I think I'm going to try more down through this area so they can have a much gentler bend in these brake lines as they disappear off behind the clocks. Go more like that. That's much more pleasing, and plus these new brake hoses are much nicer looking in all of this old dirty cable. And then just as a bit of a test, I'm going to hold it in position to make sure that the fittings on the end look like they're going in about the right direction. Okay, it looks like if I have it like that, my brake lines are going to be sticking way out into the air, so I think I'm going to need to rotate this fitting. And we do that by gently holding on to this pressed section with a pair of pliers, and then using something that isn't going to damage this fitting. I've chosen a plastic covered screwdriver. Gently rotate that fitting. Not quite, tiny little bit more, until we get the right angle. Yep, that looks about right. So now I'll take the old bolt, aluminium crush washer on, put that through the new line, another crush washer, and then we can screw that onto the caliper. Just again finger tight, so we can make sure we've got everything in the right place. On this side as well, we just need to give it a little bit of a turn, so pliers on, screwdriver in, gently rotate the fitting, do that up finger tight, and then just make sure we're happy where everything is. It's kind of randomly fallen like that, but kind of like it because it's giving us a much more natural curve than if I do it like that, because it's sticking out into space. Everything looks good up here too. It's not going to be obscuring the clocks. We're also going to be able to see that we have got braided lines. I'm nothing if not a poser. Bosh a cable tie around there. I'm using a wider one than I normally would because I don't want it to cut into the rubber covering. Plug all this nonsense back in. We can see about putting these brackets back on. Try and stop these from flapping around in the wind. First put that over the hose. It's way too big, but really it's just to protect it from the steel of this. Put the bracket over that. Squeeze it down, and then that should hopefully just nicely fall into place. It's good, giving us a nice gentle curve in the brake line here. Okay, so that's on tight. Same here on the other side. Rubber piece over the hose, clamp over the rubber piece, squeeze it together, and then that falls into place. So that's that side tight. Lovely. Yeah, it looks all right. It's a bit uneven because of how I've done that, but put cable tie around there as well, just to hold all of this steady. Stop this from flapping around too much. Not doing it up super tight because I don't want it to cut into the hoses. Yeah, they can't really go anywhere. They're not going to rub on each other. So it looks all good. I think we could tighten everything down, get some brake fluid back in there. For this job, you're going to need a handy torque wrench. And from what I could find, the standard Yamaha steel bolts should be torqued down to 28 Newton meters. That's 28. That equates roughly to about 22 foot-pounds, I think. Same on the other side. And then this aluminium one at the top should be around 22. As being aluminium, it's a lot softer and more likely to break. Okay, so that should do it. So now we can stick some fluid in the reservoir, start bleeding it through the lines. So for my bike, I've got .4 brake fluid from TRW. I just need to pop a couple of holes in there so we can pour that out. And with rags at the ready, pouring enough to fill up the reservoir. Be very careful not to get any splashes or to overfill it. That will do. And then we come back down here to the bleed nipple once again, stick our hose back on there, prepare our empty container, and very gently pump the brake lever. Gently because it's going to bubble, as you can see, and we don't want those bubbles to cause any kind of splashes. Off the bleed nipple, do it up again. A few more squeezes. Do the bleed nipple, do it up again, and repeat. As you can see, the level is going down. We just need to make sure that this level doesn't go down as far as the intake there, because then we'll be drawing more air into the system. So now the level's quite low, so top that up again. Okay, we've got a bit of resistance there, so that means we're pretty much to where we need to be. I'll do it once more. There aren't really any air bubbles in there, so I'm going to move over to the other side after I've topped it up a little bit more. And then, same as on the other side. It looks like, amazingly, it's filled up both of the hoses at the same time, because we've already got fluid coming straight through here. There's still a little bit of air coming through. Top it up again. Oh, big bunch of air there. Every time these air bubbles come out, I can feel it firming up on the next go. It's always good to remember that it always takes a lot more fluid to bleed the brakes through than is in the system, because you've got to work all these bubbles through. That's getting nice and firm now. There's another bunch of air. That was a good clean one that time. That lever feels very firm. So I'll stop there on this side and come back over to this side, finish the job. Yep. Brake lever now has a really solid feel. There's no air coming through at all, so I think the job is a good one. Wipe off excess around the bleed nipple, put my little cap back on, same on the other side, and then all that's left to do, top this up a tiny little bit, put the reservoir cap back on, careful for any spills as it drops the gasket into the reservoir there. There we go, a bit of seepage around the edge. Then we can put the screws back in, which for the next time I'm going to have to be prepared to replace. I think they're not going to last too many more installations. Again, keeping a rag handy in case anything seeps out as the gasket goes tight. And there we go. The job is a good one. I now have a lovely set of stainless steel braided brake lines on the front of my Yamaha FZ1N, and checking the joints and the seams, we've got no seepage, no leakage anywhere at all. Looks good. And the brake feel, yeah, that's really solid. I like it. That's that. All I need to do now, stick the headlight back on, but I'm going to do the headlight in my own time. You don't have to watch that. So I will just thank you very much for watching. I've been AndyManCam. These have been my new stainless steel braided brake lines, and I will see you next time. Ta-ra.